Welcome to the Kenya Updates live show with Maureen and Susan. Today's show is so important because we're dealing with issues of security, health, and education. Those three issues are of great concern to all of us as Kenyans and people who are living in the diaspora and also in the country of Kenya. From what I saw in the news, it looks like the governor of Mandera raised the alarm that there is a militia group that has taken over a school in Mandera, and that they're training a Juba group from South Sudan, I believe. And before that, there was a terror alert, a warning that was given by the American High Commissioner, warning Kenyans about the potential for Al-Shabaab attack. And this was on August 19th, and today is the 30th. So this is a 2-week-old warning. The embassy issued a renewed security advisory, urging heightened vigilance, particularly when you're in high traffic places. Terrorist groups, especially Al-Shabaab, they say that they remain an ongoing and persistent threat, that they could strike without warning in hotels and embassies and restaurants and malls and markets. But, Kenyans, we like to pray and we like to hope for the best, but we did not see any other notable warnings from Kenyan authorities or other diplomatic missions. So we want to understand why it is that the Kenyan government hasn't really followed up on that and hasn't issued any warnings. Does it mean that there really is no threat to life? That's a difficult place to start, but we saw that the governor of Mandera has this concern. He raised alarm over the alleged spillover of Jubaland forces into Kenya, and that, of course, is concerning. Apparently, there is fear with Somalia of refugees influx into Kenya. We have been hearing rumors that so-called Somali refugees or people on the borders have been given Kenyan IDs. We just want to make sure that we understand what's really happening. And we know that about 5,000 Somali refugees in Mandera have been hosted inside of schools, including Barako Secondary School, and they have now vacated because of this problem, with the governor raising the alarm that soldiers who are allied with Jubaland administration are crossing into Mandera County, allegedly fleeing after the Somali National Army recaptured Bulahawa. Again, you remember that the deputy president, Gachagua, while he was speaking in the US, he made allegations of these secret meetings between President William Ruto and Al-Shabaab leaders. Now, these are just allegations, of course. Nothing is substantiated, but these are his claims.
William Ruto, you need to know, the Americans want to know why you are working with Al-Shabaab. Why, when you are in Mandera, you met 3 leaders of the Al-Shabaab militia at night to discuss business with them. They want to know why. They also want to know why you have removed the requirement for vetting of non-Kenyans before they are given IDs. The Americans are concerned that suspected terrorists will be registered as Kenyans and they will find their way to America and the rest of the world and create terror in the world.
All I'm doing here is just reporting what was in the news. So the question was implications to threats to national security. So if you tie these issues together and you see that the governor of Mandera has now come with this alarm, it brings to light the issue that was raised by Gachagua, who was the deputy president until he was ousted recently. Interior CS, Cabinet Secretary Kithure Kindiki, is not Interior CS anymore. In those days, he was emphasizing that any leader making statements about terrorism must back it up with evidence and cooperate with security agencies. But honestly, sincerely, how can you get evidence of a terror attack? Other issues that we're going to be discussing today have to do with the fact that the children went back to school this week, and we want to find out about capitation. Where are we with the capitation issues of our young people? Do they have adequate funding to go to school? Or are we going to be in this serious problem again with the parents not being able to afford it? Children being sent home from school. So again, we also have the issue of SHA. We talked about that last week, but this particular week has also been really hot on that topic. It appears that some monies are missing in clandestine ways in terms of health clinics and hospitals which are not registered. I could call them ghost hospitals. Yeah. So money going to ghost hospitals. And meanwhile, we find that our own patients don't have access to medical care because they can't afford it. So I'll allow Susan to give us a little bit of an update.
For sure, there's been a lot going on. The Mandera issue and the Jubaland militia having encroached right all the way into Mandera. And in fact, he was saying about 60% of the area is occupied by these characters, and they're living in fear. They're very, very scared. Some people have fled. There's some who have stayed because of their livestock and their farming and their businesses. But he was saying that the central government, the national government, should do something about it. It's a serious issue. And he also did mention, apart from the Jubaland, he said that the Ethiopians have also encroached right into Kenya as well. We know there was some reports in the news earlier in the year about the Oromo Liberation Army, who had moved right down, as far down as Isiolo, from the border. And what they're doing is they come and they establish training camps, in Kenya, and they really should not be doing that. We are a sovereign nation, and that is certainly something of great, great concern to us. Security goes back all the way back to the abduction or kidnapping of the 5 chiefs. If you remember that story earlier, late last year, where there were 5 chiefs who were abducted and taken across the border into Somalia. The story about those 5 chiefs is that a ransom was demanded for them of about 7 million shillings. And this money was paid. Assumptions were that the area people or even the relatives of these chiefs could not have raised 7 million shillings. And they were saying that it must have been from the state. And those are the reports in the media that the government had something to do with paying that ransom for the chiefs. But what was really strange, because I was listening to an analysis of it, and they were saying that apparently when the kidnapping took place, the people around tried to chase the kidnappers, and they were stopped by police from actually catching the kidnappers. And then they fled. They're saying high-level meetings were held with these people who are associated with Al-Shabaab, who kidnapped the 5 chiefs. And so they're saying there are high-level meetings with elders of the village, the ones who negotiated, who were talking to the Al-Shabaab for the release of the chiefs. And those guys demanded 7 million shillings. And of course, the big question again is, if the government paid 7 million shillings, are we really supposed to be negotiating with terrorists as a nation? The implications there are quite severe. So the story about the insecurity in that area dates all the way back to that. So my question is, when I was listening to this argument, this particular station was trying to fact check regarding Gachagwa's allegations that the president met with Al-Shabaab militia in Mandera. And they were fact checking it and saying the information they have is that these 5 chiefs were kidnapped. The residents tried to flee after them. They were stopped by the police. Later on, high-level elders met with these people, and not being specific about who exactly met with the Al-Shabaab. And 7 million shillings was paid. There's a contradiction there. So why would the police stop people from catching the Al-Shabaab who had kidnapped the 5 chiefs? Why would they stop them and then the government pays? So what's the truth in that story? It's really murky. There's no smoke without fire. So there is a story there, which needs to be unraveled well by those who have all the evidence, but it doesn't look good. And like Maureen is saying, questions are being asked and they need to be answered. Kenyans, we have experienced terrorist attacks. There are still families today who are reeling from the shock of the 98 bombings in Nairobi. They're so badly affected by that. And Westgate, still some people cannot even go to Westgate. To this day, they are still terrified, of going to Westgate and other places. Yeah, so Kenyans, let's be vigilant, let's be careful, and let's watch out. But I think the security question goes beyond just terrorism. This past week, we celebrated Katiba at 15 on the 27th of August. 15 years ago, 2010, 27th of August, the new constitution was promulgated by the 3rd president of the Republic of Kenya, Mwai Kibaki. And so there was an audit on the gain made in the 15 years. And really, the picture is notwithstanding having having a robust-looking constitution, we have, and this is in the news, our current president has never supported the 2010 constitution. He has never supported it. He's one of the guys who didn't want it to pass.
The question is, at what stage did he vote against it?
There was the constitution making. It took like over 10 years for us to come out with the 2010 constitution. Don't forget the bananas and oranges. Yes, no. In is it in 2005, and people said no. The oranges carried the day, so they said no. And then later on, again, they went back to the drawing board, and the current constitution is what was passed, what Kenyans accepted. So the referendums, there were two referendums actually. So one was in 2005, and then the other one was later on, and that's when the constitution was approved by the public. And it's a very sort of forward-looking one. It has talked about the Bill of Rights, the human rights. It talks about integrity and leadership, and establishment of a number of constitutional institutions which are supposed to oversight certain things, like the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commissioner oversighting the integrity and leadership chapter, and also the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. Those guys are now the ones who have that role to check excesses of, or to oversight excesses in leadership and integrity under the Constitution. Actually, the media took quite a bit of time to talk about the Constitution. They got the views from the youth, and the things you're talking about are related, So, for instance, on the issue of security, we know Bill of Rights actually talks about the security of the person, in different contexts. So, for instance, the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, their report showed that there have been 115 deaths following the protests, in 2004, 2024, and 2025. Enforced disappearances are 89. Missing persons still 29. Arbitrary arrests of protesters about 600. We know that people have passed away, torture and death whilst in police custody. The case of Albert, and there are many others. In fact, I think since Albert, there have been several others, over 20 others who have passed away whilst in police custody. Then we have the human rights activists who have also been arbitrarily arrested and charged. For instance, Boniface Mwangi was arrested on charges of terrorism, which were later dropped to being in possession of an live ammunition. And by the way, that is one. I think he was found with one round. He wasn't found. Allegedly, they said he had one round. And Boniface, of course, said, I don't even own a gun. Then we had, of course, the persecution of the media houses. They've been threatened with closure, especially during the protests, where the communications authorities told them, threatened to close them down. The lawyers rushed to court and they were told to they were told to desist. The newsrooms didn't close down, but instead they reacted as any good citizen would do, and they rushed to court and got orders against the closure. We know, again, also journalists have been injured who have been trying to record and report what's happening. For instance, on the return of Gachagua, a journalist from TV 47 and Citizen, or one of the other major news houses, they actually were injured quite badly. They were simply trying to just capture the moment. But you know what happened along near City Cabanas? There was a barricade by hostile people who stoned the motorcade, and they attacked the vehicles. So the journalists who were trying to report were injured. We also know there's been censorship. So the journalists have also been hunted and locked up and for reporting on certain things on the news, and also censorship of what they are reporting.
Isn't that against the law anywhere in the world, or what? Can you advise us on that, being a lawyer? What are the rights of journalists globally? What is a generally accepted rule on media?
It's a constitutional. It's in our constitution. Freedom of of expression. the media falls under that particular right. They're supposed to report news to us. So they were doing their job. So the injuries, of course, that's a criminal offense. Not just a journalist, anybody. You're not supposed to intentionally harm anybody. And you can't even consent to being harmed. Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw a video of a journalist who was really seriously injured, and he was talking from a hospital bed, and a rock had been thrown at his head, actually. And he's with one of these major media houses. And I asked myself, what is the responsibility of government in this particular case? Are they supposed to seek compensation, or what happens? Because you see, media freedoms should be protected. They never know when they will need the media themselves to report on when they are on the wrong side. So what's going to happen if they do this kind of censorship and allow it to continue this way? Because it appears to me that we're becoming a bit of an authoritarian state. It's very authoritarian.
The Constitution at Article 34 talks about freedom of the media. They have a special role to play in a democratic society in terms of keeping people informed and letting people know what's happening around them. So there's freedom and independence of electronic, print, and all other types of media is guaranteed, but does not extend to any expression specified in Article 33(2). That's propaganda for war, incitement to violence, hate speech, advocacy of hatred, or whatever. So these journalists are merely reporting what they're saying, and they were attacked. So they're certainly entitled to protection of the law. In terms of the liability of government, if they could prove that the security machinery failed to protect them in any way, they could take civil action against them and get damages and compensation for the injuries that they sustained, maybe even exemplary damages, which are which are sort of calculated at a higher rate because of the fear they experience, the terror, the expectation not being met, and stuff like that. Expecting the police who are present there to really manage the people who are protesting. But of course, we saw that the media captured this in the videos, and even Wananchi who happened to be using their phones or whatever other devices, was that the police and the guys who were throwing stones, the goons, were together. The police were not arresting the goons, which is what they should have been doing. They were sort of like shoulder to shoulder. They're on the same side. Instead of forming a barricade to stop those goons from attacking the other citizens, the journalists and all that, they did nothing. Whoever takes that matter to court would really have to be able to establish that, perhaps take those videos and show, really, this is what was happening. We were here, our expectation was, and the police would be protecting people and not, just standing by or participating in causing injury to Wananchi. So there is a remedy, there is a redress. The law says he who alleges must prove. So they have to take the matter to court and make sure they have sufficient evidence for exemplary damages. If they are able to identify, let's say, the individuals themselves, if the police themselves struck them, the way we have the case of Boniface Karaoke, where we can actually see who shot him. Remember? And also the case of Rex Masai, where a journalist actually caught the image of the policeman who shot Rex, and he had some distinctive features on his face. I'm not sure how far that case has gone, but show a link between saying that the person on this video is this gentleman who has been brought to court and who is alleged to have committed that particular offense. So it means that you have to collect enough evidence, and young people are usually well armed and very quick with their phones. They're able to collect a lot of information very quickly on their phones. So I'm sure that evidence can be collected. I hope I've answered your question.
Thank you so much for that explanation. The reason I ask this is because I feel like journalists might actually be intimidated now from covering what's going on in the country. And as we are receiving these kinds of advisories, like from the US government on something like a terror a potential terror attack. I don't know whether they're in their training or whether their media houses actually follow up on their behalf. But it's very concerning when we are seeing time after time, journalists are always being attacked. The last time that we had a situation where women were fighting for their rights against femicide, again, journalists were also attacked. The journalists that were covering those women who went to the city to demonstrate and to protest against femicide, they were also attacked. And they were attacked right there in front of Nation House. I believe it was in front of the Nation Media House. And the question is, how is that still allowable now in this day and age? So let me just share one video just to, highlight this matter. And also the follow-up by the CS himself, I believe the Internal Security. Let me see if I can find a way to share. Yeah, here he is. Let's see what he has to say here. These matters need to be highlighted more by people like us who are content creators, because just like the CS said, not just the journalists, but the members of the public as well. That includes also content creators who could be there taking video with their phones. And they could also be attacked by the same goons. So the police should ensure security for all members of the public in such situations. Yeah, like when with the Rigathi entourage returned from the US. Thank you, Susan. Sorry, I just didn't want to belabor the point. It's important that we raise about the security of whistleblowers, of journalists collecting information. I think our country should not be something like a dictatorship. It should be open, free, and democratic. A democratic nation with a democratic leader, we should have freedom of expression and freedom of engagement. Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you.
certainly. About the journalists, they have their rules also about how to go out when you're out in the field, what you must have. So they have the identity badges. If you notice, they have like overcoats or a jacket, and it says media. You can clearly see these are media people. Some of them actually have helmets as well, protective headgear and stuff like that. But they're very distinctively dressed. You can't really confuse them for being wananchi because they have their label. So if you ask me, there's a high likelihood that an attack on a journalist is actually deliberate, because whoever it is doesn't want whatever they're shooting to be seen. And that's the unfortunate part of it, because if you check on any video, you can see clearly these are journalists. They have their cameras, their paraphernalia, their badges, their clothes are marked media personnel. So it's unfortunate that actually happened. And let's hope that our government is very serious about protecting people when they're out exercising their civic duty.